All right, everyone, welcome to Week 12 edition of Hot Takes and Hot Cakes. I'm Matt Harmon, trying to blindly navigate this show, I guess, and I'm here with two fine-looking gentlemen, Dan, and we have TJ on for the whole show. So why don't you guys introduce yourself to talk about whatever the hell you want to talk about to start the show. Dan, you can go first.
Yeah, well, first I want to say I'm really happy we got TJ on for the whole show. There's been a ton of times, as you guys obviously know, we're answering questions, we're talking about fantasy football, and we want a daily take, or we just say something about daily, and in any of those times, I'd like to just have TJ as a resource, and now we have that because he knows this stuff way better than me and Matt. We were just talking about this on the pre-show before this, just shooting the shit, talking around, and we were telling him listen, man, we haven't done enough daily, I feel like, to be experts on it or whatever. I wouldn't even call any fantasy football guys experts, but informed.
None of us are experts.
Exactly. No, that's not the right word, but you guys know what I mean.
We're better guessers.
Yeah, it's better guessers. There you go. So
expert in tricking people into thinking we know something.
Yeah, and then getting paid the big bucks, guys. We get paid a lot of money to do it. Yeah, anyway. Raking it in, yep. But anyway, besides that, really, really happy. We got a lot of questions this week, so I'm glad to start going on the questions. That's, in my opinion, that's the best part about this morning show, this Sunday morning show. Obviously, we talk fantasy football all week. Me and Matt, I know we do a podcast. I don't know if TJ also does, but I've seen him on a bunch. We're talking week, the week, all week, the week 11 or 12 or 13, whatever we're in all week. So I'm glad that we're going to get to answer some questions, help you guys out with some individual and more specific, fantasy problems. So that'll be cool. TJ, you got anything to add?
No, I think you covered it pretty well. I'll be bouncing some season long ideas off you guys for decisions I can't make for the exchange for the DFS talk. So let's do it.
Awesome. All right, well, let's get rolling here. We've got a few questions. Oh my God. Sorry, I just saw something hilarious while I'm looking for questions. Okay, so here we go. We've got our first question comes from @CaseyDraftnik, and he asks us, I have Mike Evans, Jeremy Maclin, Josh Gordon, and Eli Hilton. I have to bench one of them. Who are you benching? And this is interesting because it is that's really realistic. There are a lot of people who probably have that exact, I can see this lineup actually happening. So I'll throw this to you guys first. Which one of those four are you putting on the bench this week? There's not really an easy decision.
So we got T.Y., Gordon, Evans, and who?
Maclin.
So I'll start by just saying I can't bench Evans because he's just been – this is just me. I'll start with that. I can't bench Evans. He's been wide receiver one in my book, at least, for the past few weeks. If you look at the scores, it's just unbelievable the kind of fantasy points he's putting up. This doesn't surprise me. He was not even one of. He was my favorite. I have an article out on it just to prove it in case you don't believe me, but he was my favorite receiver coming into this draft, and I have a few ways to prove that to you both. If you don't believe me now, it seems like hindsight. But yeah, I love this guy coming out. Okay, good. A lot of people were saying it was Johnny Manziel who made Evans. I always thought that it was Evans who made Johnny Manziel. Not to say I didn't like Johnny Manziel too, but because I do. But Evans was just you look at some of the games. If you watch some of the game tape on some of his college games, he put up 269 against. He put up back-to-back 269, 212 games against two SEC teams. He's 6'5", runs a 4.5 flat, can jump, has a great vertical. He's physical. He works back to the quarterback really well. He's elusively a really good vertical route runner. This guy's the real deal. He's a real talent. And it's clicking in the NFL quicker than I thought it would. I didn't go out and draft him in every league because I thought it would take him some time in that shitty Tampa Bay offense, but it didn't. And at this point, he's locked into all my lineups. And then I really think that we're gonna have a good chance to see Maclin get going this week with Sanchez against Detroit. Obviously, the way to beat Detroit this year has been through the running game. They're the worst run defense according to Pro Football Focus by their measures and their standards, which means it's a good way for the Eagles to attack on the ground. But there's just going to be a lot of points in this one, and there's going to be a lot of big plays. And I think that Sanchez could definitely hit Maclin for some scores in this one. And then it's T.Y. and who's the other one, Matt?
Josh Gordon.
Gordon, yeah. So then I'm rolling with Gordon, and I'm sitting T.Y., which is probably a very, I don't know, what's the word, contrarian view, because T.Y.'s got Jacksonville at home in the Dome, and he'll probably put up some big points. But I just can't be the guy who has Josh Gordon and sits him against the Falcons. I had Josh Gordon last year. I drafted him in all leagues. He was one of my favorite preseason guys, and he carried me and won me a trophy that I should put out here, show everybody, but I won't. It's a cool trophy, though. But anyway, he won that trophy. He's just like, to me, he's just the type of talent that I can't sit if he's playing. He takes like crossing routes to the house. He goes over the top. He hits posts. He hits slants. Like he's the real deal. So I got to get Gordon going, and that's a tough thing to bench Hilton. But the other three to me are just really good matchups. I'm sure you guys might see this one differently. So DJ, you want to touch on this than Matt?
Yeah, my initial reaction was to bench Evans just because of all the things you said about Gordon not being able to bench him. I had him on a bunch of teams last year too, and I mean he's just an elite talent. He's the kind of guy that's gonna raise the quarterback's play. I'm a firm believer that an elite wide receiver is gonna raise the play of their quarterback. But you might have kind of convinced me on Evans there. My big thing is just kind of the sustainability of it. He's been kind of playing out of his mind lately. I don't know how much he can keep up with. I mean, McCown is that throw the ball up to the big guy, but eventually, ASJ and VJax kind of have to get theirs a little bit. So my initial reaction there is to sit Evans, but I don't think you could really go wrong in that situation. I mean, you're starting 4 studs. I don't think you're ever benching T.Y. Hilton, especially. I mean, in season long, you kind of want to approach it similar to a head-to-head in daily, unless you're a huge underdog. I mean, you just need to beat one person, so you want the highest floor possible. I think T.Y. Hilton gives you the highest floor out of all those guys. If it was me, I'm probably benching Evans just because I can't see myself quitting Gordon, but I don't really think there's a wrong answer on this one.
Just to chime in real quick before you touch it, Matt, I did just read a report, and this is obviously just a report, that Gordon's only going to play 20 to 30 snaps today.
Yeah, I looked a little bit more into that article, and it also said that it's going to depend on how he feels.
Oh, okay.
It might be more. So I mean, if they have him slated in for 30 snaps and they're like, hey, let's bring him out. He looks tired. I don't think that's going to happen. Why? So they can make sure Hawkins gets more targets or something.
Right. Actually, that's a good point.
So I saw that too, but I mean, if he's already slated for 60% of the snaps, like, come on, he's playing.
Yeah.
Let's send it to Jesus Gordon over there now.
Listen.
Is that Jesus? No, that's not Jesus.
No, this is last Sunday.
That might have been it.
Monday night. Me and Phil Alexander, one of the other footballguys.com staff writers, he sent out a tweet saying Josh Gordon is like Gandalf riding into Helm's Deep with the Rohirrim to save my 7-4 or whatever fantasy team. So I quickly did a quick Photoshop of this.
There was a Reddit thread with a bunch, and I tweeted out a bunch of pictures.
I saw something.
There's some good ones on there.
So my point is here, you've been holding on to Josh Gordon for this whole time. You're not benching him this week. You didn't hold on to him or trade for him in a season-long league to sit him down. So, he's riding in like Gandalf to save your fantasy teams. He's definitely the one I'm having in the lineup. I actually think that I'm going to put down Macklin just because I feel like, with the targets there in Philadelphia, he's been getting fed most of the year, but that wasn't necessarily with Sanchez, who I know TJ will not call him by name.
Chip Kelly's quarterback.
Chip Kelly's quarterback. That was with Chip Kelly's quarterback number 2 in the lineup. That was when Foles was playing, not Sanchez. So I'm not so sure if he's going to lean on him as much as Macklin's been leaned on most of the season. So I can kind of see like the trend of his targets kind of going away. And I can't sit Evans, I can't sit Gordon, and I don't want to sit Hilton in a really good matchup. I think it's between Macklin and Hilton to me. But like the only reason I would see you sitting Hilton is that the game flow might not be so favorable if they're blowing out Jacksonville or something like that. But I think I'm going to put down Macklin. So
all right, that's the most help we'll get with the three of us. 3 different answers.
Yeah. So I guess you got. whoever sent the question, you got to just kind of take whoever's word for it that you thought argued it the
You really
best.
can't go wrong. I mean, you got 4 studs.
You do, yeah. You're in
I
good
don't think
shape.
you're in a position where that's gonna cost you your game.
Right. Agreed.
Now we're back to looking at me. I'm not Gandalf Gordon there, but okay. So we'll move on to the next question here. This one comes in from @TreeTree 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. I still love saying that name. PPR pick two: Shane Vereen, Andre Johnson, Isaiah Crowell, or Mike Wallace. I I don't really have. This is another one where it's not a clear answer to me. I think for me personally, I'm going to go um, with Crowell as one of them, and I know that that might not be the obvious choice, but it's such a great matchup against the Falcons, and he's for a long time we've all been saying he's probably the most talented back they have. They just cut Ben Tate, so you would assume that he is going to get a lot of run. Although who knows with Cleveland and all that sometimes, but he's definitely one for me. And I would say the other one will probably be Shane Vereen. I feel like this is a Vereen game. It's a favorable. It should be competitive. I don't see the Patriots pulling away from Detroit, and I don't see Detroit handling New England either. So I feel like this is one of those games where Vereen is going to be a good play, especially in the PPR league. And I mean, I'm not crazy about Wallace or Johnson either. So I think I'm going to go with the two running backs. What about you guys?
I'm actually gonna take Crowell and Wallace in this one. So to me, Wallace is the type of guy who's very matchup dependent. When that Dolphins offense can get going, he tends to have pretty big games. Like I'd have to get up his player profile right now, which I'm gonna try to do while talking. But he was shut down against the Bills, and that was pretty much his only bad game. I think he only had one other bad game the entire year. So Wallace has actually been a pretty dependent player. I think that the game flow will be in his favor against the Broncos. They're going to have to throw the ball. They're going to have to move the ball. And this Broncos pass rush has really taken a step back over recent weeks. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that actually. Wallace had a few bad weeks in a row before. 3 of his last 4 weeks have not been on par with his others. So he's not a guarantee anymore as a wide receiver too. But I like him in this matchup. I think the Dolphins' offense will move the ball pretty well. The Broncos just haven't been able to, for some reason, to generate the pressure that they have been earlier in the season, and it's kind of taken its toll over the last few weeks. And then Crowell, I really like in this matchup. Now, I don't think the Falcons' run defense is as bad as some people think. They're really more susceptible to the pass. And like last week against the Panthers, I think it was like Debo had one nice outside run, but besides that, the running backs kind of went stagnant. They went like 2 or 3 yards per carry against the Falcons. Granted,
Yeah, but Williams is terrible.
There you go. I was just going to say, Matt will probably tell you that their running game is just disgustingly bad, but and it is. But still, they move the ball through the air when they finally start to let Cam Newton get control of that game. So I think it'll be more throwing than people think, even after they're going to try to, especially with Josh Gordon back. So I don't love it as much as maybe Matt does, but to me it's just safer than Andre with Mallet, who we still don't really know what's going on there. And to me, Vereen. Granted, I agree with Matt, and I wrote about this week, and I talked about this week. Don't go crazy on Jonas Gray for this reason. I think this will be a Vereen game, and I think that going forward, it'll just be in that Patriots backfield. It'll just be game by game, matchup by matchup type flows with the running backs. But I don't think it's going to be an anyone game for the Patriots backs personally, because it's the Lions, and the Lions have just been really tough. They shut down Andre Ellington last week for the first time anyone shut him down all season. So to me, I can't play a running back in that matchup at all. So yeah, just kind of by default, I'll go Wallace and Crowell. But I don't mind them. They both have some upside in their matchups. Do you see it differently, TJ?
I'm actually right there with you, Dan. I'm on Crowell. Matt, you said you don't think it's the super obvious play. I think Crowell's a great play. Atlanta's last in the league adjusted for strength of schedule against running backs, and I'm going Wallace as a second option there. I agree with what you said about Vereen. It is a Vereen type game, but I don't think it's an anyone type game against Detroit. I'll talk about this a little bit more as we get into some of the DFS cash plays later. But one thing I've been looking at the last couple of weeks is player consistency across positions. If you've read any work on 4 for 4 by Chris Raybon, he talks a lot about player CV. Basically, it's just a standard deviation away from a player's average points per game. Mike Wallace has been the second most consistent wide receiver behind Antonio Brown compared to his average points per game. This doesn't mean that they're the best player, obviously, because you can be average and mediocre, but there's some value in knowing what you can expect out of your player. And those consistent players, if they're kind of that wide receiver one, wide receiver two player, then you can at least trust that they're going to give you a high floor. So Mike Wallace, even though he's had a couple mediocre games past few weeks, over the course of the season, he's been the second most consistent receiver. So I like Wallace this week. I like that the game script should favor him because they're going to need to throw, and Denver hasn't been good against wide receivers in terms of fantasy points allowed this year. So I'm right there with you, Dan. Mike Wallace and Crowell for me.
Yeah, that's interesting about Wallace and the consistency thing. It's not something you'd normally associate with a player like him, but that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and again, I mean, it's just something that it strictly looks at fantasy points scored per game and their average. Yeah. So it's just one piece of the puzzle, but it's something that's definitely interesting to look at. But it also comes with those consistent players. I mean, if they're consistently mediocre, it also means that they don't have a very high ceiling. It's just based on deviation from the mean. So deviation could mean that they're deviating a lot higher than their mean too. So it's, like I said, it's a piece of puzzle, but it's super interesting.
No, yeah, that's cool. And I think the good thing about we all said Crowell. And I think the good thing about him is that with Gordon coming back, you'd assume that will kind of just the presence of a weapon like that will open up the field for the running game, which has been a little more stagnant, recently than it was in the beginning of the season. But okay, so moving on to next question. You mentioned Jonas Gray, Dan. I think that was you. We got a question here from @BradF35, and he asks us trade Jonas Gray and Pierre Garçon for Odell Beckham Jr. So that's Jonas Gray for and Pierre Garçon, who we know has been a big disappointment recently for Odell Beckham. Either of you guys making that trade?
I'm stacking that trade up real quick. I'm sorry, TJ. You want to take it first?
Oh, I was just gonna say I'll take Beckham in that trade for sure. I think that's the highest value you're gonna get on Jonas Gray this year. If you have another running back too, then I'm probably gonna be a lot more comfortable plugging in a different RB2 for the rest of the season with Belichick and Vereen factor and Garçon. I mean, give me a wooden dollar for Garçon at this point. I mean, where can you really plug him in?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're in a really good spot here with this trade. Hopefully it's still on the table. You have somebody who's still kind of trying to buy into Garçon based on his name and based on what he's done over the past few seasons, and that's fine. But in this Washington offense right now, they just lost All-Pro and probably their best offensive player overall, Trent Williams, to an injury. He won't be playing this week. His status going forward, he's going to try to fight through it, which is interesting, but he has a serious injury, so I wouldn't expect him to be as effective. So without him, this is going to be a total collapse mode, I think, for this Redskins offense. Griffin has no footwork right now, and he really never has. He's kind of just a quarterback who needs a clean pocket, and he's not going to get it. So I don't think he's going to be throwing the ball well. I think that he'll even be potentially benched by the end of the season for Colt McCoy. It sounds shocking, but
I really hope you're right.
If I'm right, we're going to talk about it because the Redskins have a decision. The Redskins have a crazy decision to make this offseason. I'll get back to the question in a second, but Griffin, they're going to have to. It's not a crazy decision. It's pretty much an easy decision. They're going to decline his fifth-year option, which would make them have to pay him $18.2 million guaranteed in 2016, which seems extremely unlikely that they'll pick it up. So once they decline that, which is on May 10th of the next year. He'll be a $3.2 million player for 2015, and he'll be done. And the question is, and the likelihood will be that the Redskins will start receiving calls because at $3.2 million against the cap, it's a really good bargain to get a quarterback in the NFL these days. So they'll probably start receiving calls and try to get a fourth, third rounder or some kind of compensational pick that can turn into a third or second. So I don't think the Redskins will have RG3 next year. I think he'll be traded. And maybe they'll want to keep him in for that reason to showcase his talents. But I think everybody kind of knows what they're getting with him. They're buying low on a guy who has some natural talent, good deep arm, and I guess maybe still some speed and some looseness. But anyway, I think that whole Redskins offense is a mess. And if McCoy gets back in, it helps Garcon, but overall it's not going to help him enough. You're trading Garcon. You're trading a guy like Jonas Gray, who's a week-to-week guy, as we've talked about. He was going to be a week-to-week guy even before the Patriots added Blunt, but now that they added Blunt, his value's even lower. He's going to split snaps even in those games where the Patriots kind of try to just run the ball down the opponent's throat. And then on the flip side, you got a guy like Beckham, who's averaging 110 yards over his last 3 games. He's, as I predicted a long time ago, he quickly morphed into Eli Manning's #1 target. That's not surprising when you have guys like Reuben Randall and Preston Parker as your number 2 and 3 receivers, and Larry Donnell as your tight end. I mean, you're really looking around, scanning the field, and it's going to be Beckham every time. This guy had a 39.5-inch vertical. In the combine, he ran a 4.41. He's not playing at full speed this year because of his injury, but he said he's playing at like 85%, and his 85% looks pretty damn good. So, you know what? You're getting a really, really good player who hasn't really been tagged yet as a wide receiver 1, but I think he's pretty close to it. And he's pretty consistent. So it's a great trade. Snap it up.
Yep, I agree with that. And Griffin, we kind of divulged there into a little Griffin tangent. Yeah. And I'll just add that, I live up here right by D.C., so it has amazed me how the city's tone has changed.
Right.
With Griffin, in such a short amount of time. But he's a hot mess. Chris Cooley, I don't know if you guys heard or read the transcript from some radio interview that he did. He really just took him to task. He was pointed out a lot of flaws, and so that is a mess right now. I've never seen a coach talk so openly about how much he doesn't want his starting quarterback, and then Jay Gruden has about.
True.
It's crazy, but yeah,
I love that we just got a Chris Cooley reference on a 2014 fantasy football hangout, though. That's awesome.
Yes. Agreed.
Well, that's everything. He's doing everything he can to keep himself relevant, and he's actually doing a pretty good job of it. He's doing a pretty good job of whatever the radio show is here. But anyways, I don't care to talk about Washington football. But yeah, so back to this. Yeah, it's a great trade. And I'm taking it too. I love Odell Beckham. I have for a long time. So another Jonas Gray question we've got here. This one comes in from @AJ_PFS. Jonas Gray, Lamar Miller, Frank Gore. I can start 2 of them. Who do I start? I'm betting that you guys are gonna say to put Gray on the bench. I would start Gore and Miller. Neither of them has Gore has a pretty easy matchup ahead of him. I don't know if Miller has a great matchup, but with Gray the problem is, I think when the game script calls for power running, then you can start Gray, but this isn't really one of those games. The Lions have a good defensive line. It should be competitive. That's why I'm thinking it's more of a Marine day. And, hey, the Patriots, they reward Jonas Gray having this 4-touchdown game by going out and signing LeGarrette Blount again, which is just so typical of what they would do. So,
have you guys heard anything about him not starting or missing playing time because he was late the other day?
I read today on Roto-World that he's just, if that helps, that he's going to still see some snaps and they're going to split time, him and Blount.
Okay.
Sick.
Yeah, he was late. He was late to a meeting because his alarm on his phone didn't go off in the morning.
Belichick doesn't fuck with that stuff.
I don't know if you guys caught that, but
yeah. Oh, okay.
Belichick doesn't fuck around with stuff like that, though.
No, yeah, that's why. I mean, that's a legit concern with the Patriots. So I don't know. That's another factor. Yeah, I'm sitting Gray as well.
Cool. Pretty easy call there, I think. We got another question here from @BustinDrown, which I still think that's pretty clever. Richardson, Gray, another Gray question. Sproles, Marshall, Steve Smith, LaFell, Hopkins. There's a lot of options here, so I'm gonna run through them again.
Is this on Twitter? I'm gonna have to look at this at once.
Yeah, it's in my mentions here. I'm gonna retweet it real quick or something. Here, hang on. I'll send it to you guys.
All right.
But anyways, so killing dead air here while I do this. Richardson, Jonas Gray, Sproles, Marshall, Steve Smith, Brandon LaFell, DeAndre Hopkins. We can start one running back, 2 wide receivers, and 1 flex. I mean, it's a lot of options, but I'm going to go with Richardson as the one running back because he's going to see a lot of volume now with Bradshaw out. I mean, supposed to. Who knows? Boom Herring can end up being a factor, but I think Richardson's a pretty decent play. I don't think you can bench Brandon Marshall at all. He's a guy that I keep consistently coming back to. Hopkins is. I'm going to go with Hopkins as well, just because I think he has such tantalizing upside, with Ryan Mallett in there. And then lastly, I think for my flex, I'm going to put Steve Smith in because, I know this is kind of narrative stuff or whatever, but, he's always been really good against the Saints, and he's had kind of a down few weeks. Really, actually, for the last month or so, he's been down in favor of Torrey Smith, and I think that's how it's going to be for the rest of the season. But also, I just think with coming off the bye, giving the old man a little bit of rest, I think he'll come back and have a nice game against, some former NFC South opponents, because he is a lunatic and probably, thinks that is important. I don't know. I love the guy, but he's insane about these sort of things. So those are the options I'm going to go with. I don't know if you guys got the tweet or not.
Yep, got it.
Okay. Well,
I'll take it. I'm going to actually go with the exact same option. So I think you're in good shape here because me and Matt are agreeing, and that's always a good thing. And then if TJ agrees, you're in really good shape, Dustin Brown. But just to touch on it a little bit, nobody likes Trent Richardson's talent at this point. Once he gets stopped, he can't get started again. But he's going to get so much volume, we think, now because – and granted, I like Boom Herron, and I think that he can earn a decent role with given time, especially he had a really, really good preseason. That's what caught my eye. And obviously you shouldn't go too crazy about the preseason, but the best running back in the preseason this year was Mark Ingram. There's no denying it, just looking at all the stats, yards after contact, things like that, elusive rating on PFF. And he dominated that measurement, and the preseason, as I said, as a whole. And he ended up being a really good buy this year at a really cheap price. So I don't think you should put nothing into the preseason. And Herron had a great preseason, so keep an eye on that. But for now, you should be safe with Richardson in his role. And then can never bench Marshall. I'm in agreement in that. And then this Steve Smith matchup is a really good one against the Saints secondary. The Saints kind of showed their true colors last week. Even at home, the secondary got burned. They're getting burned left and right. They got Corey White out there at the second corner.
Corey White is awful at football.
Yeah, he's so bad.
Might be the worst in the league. Him or Antoine Cason, who's been benched.
And
hey kids, Corey White starts in the NFL, so you can be anything you want to be in life.
Oh my God.
There you go. So then saying no to Sproles because the role's just not there. Saying no to LaFell because it's the Lions, and then I'm settling in on Hopkins as my fourth because, again, I like them. I think Matt hit it on the head. I like the connection with Mallett. Mallett's arm and just the way he plays is going to be better for Hopkins. Big plays. And listen, it's week number 2 for Mallett. They're only going to get better from here. Bengals defense has looked better, which is something to worry about. They finally got going last week, which is weird because they had been really bad all season. I don't understand what changed, but something changed, and they shut down the Saints. But again, I think that he's just a really nice match with Mallett. Do you see it differently, TJ?
No, I'm right there with you guys. You guys pretty much covered all the players why you want to start them. The only guy that you might kind of consider playing over Steve Smith there is Brandon LaFell, but the matchup doesn't favor him at all. Detroit is 5th best first wide receivers adjusted for strength of schedule. LaFell's probably going to be lined up against Rasheed Mathis most of the game. Rasheed Mathis doesn't move. He stays on the right side the whole time.
Yep.
LaFell's played 60% of his snaps on the left side, and Rasheed Mathis is a tough matchup. So right there with you guys.
And Rasheed Mathis is like a million years old, so I don't know.
Yeah, he's still playing at a high level. It's crazy.
Yeah. And yeah, Corey White is probably like the worst cornerback ever. I don't understand how he keeps getting on the field every year for them because this is like the 3rd year in a row he's seen a lot of playing time. But I don't know. The Saints are pretty stupid about their cornerbacks. They tried to roll out Champ Bailey's carcass at one point this year, so that kind of sucks. But yeah. Anyway, so just a few more questions here before we get going on the schedule. This one comes in from Michael Stephanie, loyal listener to the show. He asked us, streaming D choices, Bills, Broncos, or Colts, which one do I go with? Standard scoring, all that stuff. So Bills, Broncos, Colts. Which defense are you guys taking?
I want to be in a league where I have a chance to stream all three of those.
Say that again.
I said I want to be in a league where I have the chance to stream all three of those teams.
I know,
Those
right?
are those are all great options.
Yeah.
I think Colts are probably the top streaming option this week. Jacksonville's the worst team in the league. Points allowed to opposing defense and special teams. It's going to be a really favorable game script. When you have that huge, I like to look at that Vegas line. When it's that big, it just sets up for a defense to for lack of a better term, pin the ears back, get after the quarterback, and then they're just when they're ready for the pass. That's when you see a lot of those pick sixes you see late in the game where teams are just forcing the ball. So I think it's a good situation if you can't predict a pick six, but if you're gonna look for one, I think the Colts can be your option there.
Yeah, I'm with TJ on this one. Granted, if you give me the Bills at home in this one, I might be more tempted to take the Bills. They have a better defense than the Colts, much better defensive line. But this is basically not an away game, but it's a neutral game, so that hurts them. They're not going to have the crowd on third downs, things like that. So, and Vic has been weirdly a little less turnover prone than his usual self, which I'm sure will come down to earth, and then I'll be wrong. But again, TJ's got to hit this right on the head. I mean, Colts are going to be in a lot of great. Colts defense is going to be in a lot of great position at the end of the game, where they're just ready to make pick sixes, ready to make big plays because they're up by 35 points or so. So yeah. So I think Colts is a really good play here.
Yeah, just to touch on Vic real quick, he's going to come back down to earth. He has, I think, of all the quarterbacks starting this week, he has the third worst completion percentage. He has the second worst sack rate in the league. So that's going to lead to turnovers, just hasn't yet. But we know Vic's going to turn the ball over. But still, that being said, Indy's still the play there.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. In like a season-long league, I'm definitely going to go with Indy, but actually probably in DFS I might go with Broncos just because I think they have a chance to get a turnover or two, and they're cheaper. So that's kind of one way to think about it.
Yeah, for sure. I actually wrote up the Bills as my GPP DFS play this week,
Yeah.
and then Denver I'm rolling out in a bunch of cash lineups just because Colts are so expensive on the DFS sites. But yeah, in season long, if you can get the Colts in there, get the Colts in there.
Yeah, I feel like they're not. I mean, they are playing Jacksonville, but I feel like they're not a good enough defense just on their own to pay up that much for it. But that's just one way of looking at it. Who knows? Okay, a few more questions here. This one comes in from Tim Evans. He asked us, I have Theo Riddick or Fred Jackson as my flex 12-team PPR. I'm really not crazy about either option, but I think I'm going to go with Fred Jackson. He should be getting healthier, and honestly, if Bush is playing, that hurts Riddick because they're kind of the same player at this point. So I'm not going to go with Riddick. Either of you guys disagree?
No, I'm right there with you. That Lions backfield's been frustrating this year, and I don't think you could really plug him in, especially like you said, if Bush is playing, you can't throw Riddick out there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm with you guys. I mean, I was a little nervous about Fred Jackson in the snow, but now that game's in Detroit in the Dome, I like him a little more. It's not a great play, Tim, and I'm glad you're finally back asking. I know last week you missed your question. It was right after the show had ended, but glad to get to it this week. You're probably our first and most loyal listener, or viewer, whatever you want to call it, because I guess we're on a hangout. But I mean, Jackson in this matchup could surprise because the Jets really have a good run defense, but Jackson can get going in the passing game, which will help you. And I got burned by Riddick last week in a deep league where I had to play him deep PPR. And he didn't get the role I thought he would. So for me, it's Jackson.
Yep. And Tim asks us another question. This one's more DFS oriented. So TJ, you can take this one. He wants to know which stack is better, Kyle Orton and Sammy Watkins, or McCown and a Tampa Bay receiver with Evans. Which one of those two stacks do you prefer?
I like the McCown just because I think outside of Watkins, I don't think Orton's gonna do much as far as upside and touchdowns. I think with Tampa Bay, all three of those guys, ASJ, V Jackson, and Evans have a chance to have multiple touchdown games. So you have a lot of upside with McCown in a GPP. So if you can get that stack and still squeeze Watkins in, I actually really like Watkins as a GPP play this week. But I don't think Orton has the upside to roll out in a GPP, so I'll go with the Tampa Bay stack there.
Yeah, I agree with you. And he also wants to know who are your cash game quarterbacks this week?
Cash game quarterback. On FanDuel, I have Cap. I'm going single lineup on FanDuel. Rolling out Colin Kaepernick.
Oh God, I'm praying.
Yeah, it's dangerous, but again, like I said, you touched on that. On the player consistency that I was talking about this week. Colin Kaepernick's been consistently mediocre. He's averaging right around 17 fantasy points a game, but he's only had two games under 13 fantasy points, and those were over 12 points. He's 7,300 on FanDuel, and we're just looking to meet value in those cash games. We don't need 20 points out of our quarterback, so 14.5 points meets value on FanDuel, and he's a pretty safe bet to meet that, and he has upside facing Washington. So I'm actually not nervous about Cap. A lot of people are bummed out on him because he hasn't taken advantage of some great matchups outside of that one game against St. Louis. But I trust him in a format where it's a salary cap. It's all about value. I'm not too nervous about Cap meeting value this week. I found it pretty tough to get expensive quarterbacks into my FanDuel lineups this week in cash just because salary is pretty tight and it really lowers the floor of the rest of your guys. But on DraftKings, you can afford to pay up for any of the quarterbacks. You can't go wrong. Rodgers, Manning, Luck. You can fit all of them in, and then Sanchez is really good value on DraftKings as well. I think his floor is 2 touchdowns, 300 yards, and he frees up a lot of space for you. So expensive quarterbacks are all in play, and then Sanchez and Cap are my cheap to mid-range quarterbacks for cash games.
Word. Okay, well, let's start running down this schedule. Thanks, everybody, for all the questions. We got a lot this morning, which is always nice. You all are just a treat. And I just saw something else funny. From Denny Carter retweeted Pierre Garçon saying, "Welp, what a way to start the morning." I guess that's in reference to Trent Williams. I don't know.
I don't know, but speaking of way to start the morning, apparently T.Y. Hilton's wife had their baby this morning, so that's Narrative Street going to have a huge game, right?
Oh, God, yes.
Nice.
Oh, terrific. Okay, so let's just run through the schedule here. First game up is Atlanta, Cleveland. I guess Dan and I will talk a little about the game, and TJ, feel free to just chime in with all the daily stuff from this game. We've talked a lot about Gordon already. Obviously, I think you're playing him. It's a great matchup. Crowell is the guy I'm playing in the backfield. I don't know. I guess if you have like a Roethlisberger or a Cam owner, I guess you could maybe play Hoyer in a good matchup. I don't know, but I'm never excited about that. For Atlanta's side, for me, I wrote this week for reception perception that it's time to revise your expectations for Julio Jones. I don't think you can consider him, like a high-end wide receiver one anymore, especially in a standard league because he's not scoring touchdowns. And honestly, I was really surprised by going back and watching some of his film, how unimpressive he is. I know some people, responded with me that it might be he's lost some of his explosion or they don't trust him to cut outside. Because in the routes I tracked, he wasn't running any outside routes. It was a lot of in really uncrisp in-breaking routes. And some people said maybe that's due to all the injuries he's had to his foot, and that's potentially true. But yeah, he's just not an elite. I just really don't see him as a top 10 wide receiver for fantasy, and I'm kind of questioning whether he belongs in that rank, in real life NFL football, just because it's a little alarming right now. So I'm not playing Julio. I'm playing Julio, but like I said, you're revising your expectations. I think this can be a pretty good Roddy White day, just because he's probably going to get matched up with Buster Skrine a lot, who's another terrible corner. He just gets picked on a lot. So, I mean, I think that's pretty much it for the Falcons offense. And obviously, Matt Ryan is probably a lot of people starting quarterback, and you're going that way too. But you're not, and then you're not fucking around with anything else in the Atlanta offense, like their running backs or their tight ends. So, Dan, TJ, either one of you guys want to chime in on this game?
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on two of the key points I wanted to touch on. I've been very down on Julio recently for that same reason. I mean, not even that same reason. My reason was that the Atlanta offense is just not scoring points. They're not scoring touchdowns, which is the reason why I wouldn't even be going with Matt Ryan this week either. He's somebody I'd try to put on your bench. Obviously, Cleveland defense has taken a major hit with the loss of Phil Taylor at nose tackle, but that's more so in the run defense. They're still a pretty good pass defense. They're middle of the pack. And again, like, you watch that Atlanta offense against the worst secondary in the NFL by the numbers. Carolina last week, and granted they may not actually be the worst, but by the numbers they were, and they just couldn't move. Like, they didn't score any touchdowns. I mean, that's just what's happening here. And now Matt, with Matt's take on Julio after actually rewatching him individually and seeing the way he's running his routes, the way he looks running his routes, and the type of routes he's running, I'm really down on him. So that's a big thing. But one thing I do want to touch on before I throw it over to TJ is that I do actually really, really like the Hoyer Gordon stack in tournaments this week. It's one that I'm rolling with a lot. I don't think you're going to be able to get it as cheap as you will this week in later weeks. And thinking about that stack for a second, they're facing the Atlanta Falcons defense, so you got a really good matchup, really good stack. Gordon's like around the 15th most expensive receiver, so that's pretty much in the high-end wide receiver 2 range. I don't think he'll be there again. Hoyer's was like 26th on FanDuel and like 28th on DraftKings, most expensive quarterback. So he's like under guys who aren't even starting right now, which happens a lot in these websites. So that's a stack that I think has a ton of upside, and it's at a cheap price. So I'm rolling with that stack. So that's the one thing I would like to get going. TJ, what do you think of this game?
As far as a daily goes, I think Crowell is a must-play in all formats on all sites. He's only 5,500 on FanDuel. He's 3,800 on DraftKings. He's going to get the work. The Falcons are bad against the run. He has touchdown upside. He has a high floor. As far as Josh Gordon goes, I have Josh Gordon in one cash game lineup on FanDuel. I'm sorry, on DraftKings. He's 6,300. Like you said, he's the 15th price wide receiver. He's not going to be any cheaper this year. So I kind of want that value in my lineup. We're looking for value in our cash games. GPPs, I'm not rolling Gordon out too much, just for the simple reason that I think his ownership's going to be through the roof. I do like that Hoyer Gordon stack. If you are going to roll him out, stack him with Hoyer. But if you're just kind of looking for core players, I just think so many people are so excited about him being back this week that I love Josh Gordon. I think he's going to have a good game. I hope he has a great game because I have him in so many season-long leagues. But GPPs, you want to go against the grain a little bit, and you can get another top receiver. It's not like you're ignoring an obvious running back value or something where you're just going contrarian for the sake of being contrarian. On the Falcons side of the ball, that reception perception broke my heart because Julio's a guy that I've been rolling out pretty consistently in cash games because he's been underpriced. But all the points you made in that article make it really hard to justify trusting him. But the targets are still there. He's cheap enough. I think if you have the room, that you can plug him in. And there aren't any guys in his price range on either side that are getting those 10-plus targets per game. Yeah, they've been shitty targets lately. I mean, they could barely complete a screen pass right now.
Yeah.
But again, it's in daily, if you could find those opportunities, running backs where their touches aren't priced in, or receivers where their heavy targets aren't priced in, then you kind of got to go for it. So I'm still rolling out Julio and dailies just because of that volume, and hopefully it turns into some bigger days. He still had that eight for 119 or 7 for 119 a couple weeks ago. He didn't find the end zone, so again, you just want to meet value in your cash games, and you can always justify GPP play. So in any decent stack is justifiable. But yeah, outside of Julio, probably not rolling out Matt Ryan or anything. Roddy White's cheap enough where you could probably play him in some of your cash games, especially on DraftKings. I should have his price in front of me, but I don't. But he's a good value on DraftKings on where it's full PPR.
Right. Yeah. The Atlanta offense is pretty gross right now, to be honest. Yeah. So it's tough. Yeah. Next game we'll cover is Eagles Titans. You guys got any good feelings on this one, Dan? I know you covered the NFC East pretty heavily, so you want to take this one first?
Yeah, East is my domain. As I mentioned, I really think that the Eagles are going to be able to finally get McCoy going, and it's like crazy because I've been touting McCoy now. I got burned on him last week. I was telling I had him in a matchup machine, like I had him in an article. I featured him. I thought he'd finally get going. And I will say this, McCoy's struggles have been, in my opinion, more on him than anything else. Like I rewatched that Eagles game last week against the Packers, and he had some solid holes that the offensive line created with Evan Mathis and Jason Kelsey back at center and left guard. But he kind of danced around them. He never takes the 5 or 6 yards, McCoy. He's always looking for the 15 to 20. So because of that, I don't love him. But in this game, it just works out well because Ray Horton, that Titans defense, they're a gambling defense. Horton sends tons of blitzers from all different areas and angles on every play, and if the linemen lose contain, which happens all the time because they don't really have a great defensive line, there's huge holes in the defense. You saw Le'Veon Bell just destroy them last week. So I think there'll be some huge holes, and I love McCoy in this one, and that's my strongest take. I'll just go ahead from this point on since we're probably running low on time. I'll just give my strongest take in the game. I think that's probably the best way to do it.
Yeah, I agree. For me, I actually think on Tennessee's side, I just have a feeling that, with it's such a good matchup with the Eagles. I feel like Zach Mettenberger is going to have a good game. I don't know, TJ. Do you think he's like a really kind of what the hell GPP sort of play?
I think there's too many good stacks in GPPs where I'm not gonna. I mean, a lot of people keep trying to argue Hunter. We've been doing this for 12 weeks now. Hunter's a GPP play. He's not. There's better cheap options. No one in this game that I'm really big on in cash games outside of Mark Sanchez. As far as daily goes, LaShawn McCoy has a great matchup, but there's so many good cheap options this week. We got Isaiah Crowell, Trent Richardson, even Trey Mason are all really nice cheap options at running back, and they free you up to pay for the top guys like Forte or DeMarco. So there's really no reason to go mid price this week, especially with Shady's inconsistency. And then the only really thing that I might consider is Delanie Walker's only $3,100 on DraftKings, so he frees up a lot of salary cap space for it. $3,100 is so cheap. It's basically min salary, and it won't take much for him to meet value. I mean, 3 catches for 35 yards, and he's pretty much looking at value. That's not too much to ask. So I don't mind Delanie Walker at his price, but other than Sanchez and Walker, not too many cash game options for me in that game.
Yeah, I hear you. It's tough to predict because there's good matchups all over the place, but who is going to get them? That's the question. Yeah. Lions Patriots, we've kind of talked about that one a lot. Does anybody else have a hot take they want to drop on this game?
I think we touched on that, to be honest. I don't have anything else to add.
Yeah, I think we're kind of clear on the way we feel like the game script is going to go.
The only thing that I would say about that game, I mean, there's no glaring values in DFS, but Brandon Browner has struggled a little bit, and Calvin Johnson should be matched up with them a fair amount. Calvin Johnson's lined up on the left 45% of the time. Browner lines up on the right 2/3 of the time. So Calvin Johnson might be able to exploit that matchup a little bit. So if you want to roll him out in GPPs, I'm fine with that. But too many good cash games options around his price point if you're going expensive wide receiver in cash.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like this is not a Golden Tate game at all. I mean, I don't think it's going to be tough to predict him in general. But that's my one take from this game is he's not a player that I would be looking to get into lineups. Packers-Vikings, another pretty obvious one. I'm sure the Packers will cream the Vikings, and Aaron Rodgers and the boys will be out by the fourth quarter again. What are your guys' takes on this one? Dan?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of with you again. I think that they'll have a really good game. The Vikings even took a step back last week, which surprised me because they had been really good. And the last time these two teams matched up, the Packers didn't really have any trouble with the defense. So they're aggressive. Mike Zimmer likes to blitz the A gap. He likes to blitz. So I think that doesn't work in the favor of a defense when you're facing Aaron Rodgers because he just has such a quick trigger and he can really whip a ball out there. So I'm with you here. I like Aaron Rodgers a lot in this week. So it probably makes him a solid daily play. But TJ can probably touch more on that.
Yeah, go ahead, TJ.
Yeah, Aaron Rodgers is always going to be a cash game option. He's going to have one of the highest floors of any quarterback, regardless of his salary. Same with Jordy. If you can fit him in your lineup, feel free. On the other side of the ball, not too many values that are glaring for Minnesota. Uh, if there weren't so many cheap options this week at running back, then McKinnon would be in play with Asiata out. Obviously not worried about Ben Tate, but there's too many good cheap options, so there's no real reason to play McKinnon and Daly this week.
Yeah, makes sense. Jaguars and Colts. This one's another pretty. This one will probably be another blowout. Here's my question to you guys: Does anyone have the you could say balls or lack of self-respect to play Kobe Fleener this week with Dwayne Allen out? I actually feel like he's gonna. Well, it's interesting. I know his price is really high on I hate Kobe Fleener, but anyway.
I know.
That has long been one of our show's mottos.
I know. And the worst part about it is, I have to answer your question, Matt. After joining in with you and bashing him, I'm starting him in a league this week. Oh man, my tight end situation's miserable, and it just seems like the move.
You guys, this sucks because we hate both of these guys, but Trent Richardson's top 10 running back this week, and Kobe Fleener's a top 5 tight end this week. It's gross, but if you take the names off, I mean, they just are there. Trent Richardson's same as Isaiah Crowell. He's in play everywhere. He's going to get the touches. He has goal line. He's going to get goal line work. He has touchdown upside. He's 5,500 on FanDuel, and on DraftKings he's 4,900. So again, he frees up tons of salary. He has tons of upside. Kobe Fleener, he's expensive on DraftKings, or he's fairly priced on DraftKings. On FanDuel, he's really cheap. He is 40. Sorry, I don't have all these in front of me. I'm jumping around spreadsheets and lineups and whatnot. 5,400 on FanDuel, the 11th price tight end. The Colts have targeted their tight ends 102 times this year. That's fourth most in the league. They have 13 targets inside the 10-yard line. That's the second most in the league. Luck loves targeting his tight ends, especially in the red zone. Kobe Fleener is a must-play in season long if you don't have Graham or Gronk. And then on FanDuel, if you can't squeeze Gronk in, Fleener's my favorite play for both cash games and GPPs. On the Jacksonville side of the ball, on DraftKings, I think you can roll Cecil Shorts out, especially in cash games. I don't know if he has the upside you want in a GPP, but let me see. His price is, again, sorry, I don't have everything in front of me that I should. Let me see its price here. It's cheap. Sorry, guys. Scrolling here. Yes, he's 5,400. With Allen Robinson out, he's going to get the targets that you want in a cash game. They're going to be throwing the ball. And then Allen Hurns is a GPP play on both sites. 5,900 on FanDuel, 3,200 on DraftKings. He's going to be their deep play guy. You definitely don't trust him in a cash game, but we've seen him blow up already this year, so I don't mind rolling him out in a GPP. So actually lots of daily options in this game.
Yeah, definitely. That Trent Richardson and Kobe Fleener call is probably true, but it does feel gross going down.
It does feel gross. But take the names off the jerseys, and I mean you gotta go for it.
You gotta do it. Okay, so next game. Bengals and Texans. Ryan Mallett, part 2. What a gross quarterback matchup, Andy Dalton and Ryan Mallett. We've got gross all over the place, but this is another one here. How do you guys see the Gio-Jeremy Hill split going?
That's what I was going to ask you guys because I need to figure that out for my season long.
Yeah, I don't. I imagine it'll be pretty close to even. I feel like they're, if Gio's playing, they're going to give him touches, but Hill has kind of worked his way into getting touches, even though he wasn't really, when Gio was healthy. I feel like now it's going to be sort of that, 50-50 annoying split where when in the beginning of the season it was clearly Gio, and then when he was out it was obviously clearly Hill. There was a lot of clarity. Now I feel like there's none. So I have no idea. What about Dan? What do you see with the running back situation there?
I think it'll be a little more Gio, actually. I don't think that he was the starter. He earned it earlier in the preseason. And I think he'll probably get closer to like 60% of the snaps, and Hill will get 40, which is still way high compared to where the split was earlier in the year when Hill really had games of, I looked it up to make a point and argument to a friend, but he had games of 18, 11, 13, and 15 snaps. That's just not even touches. That's just snaps. So I can't see that happening, but I still think he'll only have closer to like 30, 35 snaps and like 40% of the actual touches. Because Gio is the starter and he's back, and it's not, usually say that injuries, you shouldn't lose your job to injuries.
Yeah. Well.
All right. Well, let me use this to ask you guys. Then I got to pick 2. I have Jeremy Hill, Bishop Sankey, Ryan Matthews, Alfred Blue, and Gio. So I got Hill and Gio, and then Bishop Sankey, Ryan Matthews, Alfred Blue.
Don't you dare put Bishop Sankey in your lineup. Well, wait, is it PPR or not?
Full PPR.
Okay, then I would play Gio in blue because Foster's out.
Yeah, full PPR. I definitely want to play blue. That's for sure. I just have to decide if I want Gio or who's the other guy you said? Not Sankey that I kind of liked.
Ryan Matthews.
Matthews. Let me see his match. And Rams. No. Okay. Yeah, I'm with Matt. Gio and blue. I mean, obviously Hill has a chance to outproduce Gio, but the PPR thing helps here. Helps you in this case a lot.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of that split either, but yeah, I'm kind of with you guys there. If Gio's back, he's gonna get the starter reps, but it's definitely one of those situations where if you've been rolling him out as your running back 3, then sitting Gio isn't a horrible option this week if you have other options.
Yeah.
But as far as daily goes in that game, I really like AJ Green in this game.
Yeah.
Every week I talk about that Fantasy Outsiders defense first type of wide receiver. Houston's 32nd versus wide receivers adjusted for strength of schedule, and they're the worst team versus number 1 wide receivers, allowing 95 yards per game to number 1 wide receivers. That's really important when you have a clear-cut number 1. Obviously, AJ is the number 1 wide receiver there. He's only $7,300 on DraftKings. That's the 9th priced wide. On both Johnson and Hopkins are really good values this week. They are Johnson's 5,200, Hopkins 5,300, so they're both really fairly priced. The matchup isn't great, but again, the targets are there for both of them. They're getting, we saw 10 targets last week for Johnson with Mallett in there, and Mallett obviously, like you touched on earlier, helps with the deep ball for DeAndre Hopkins. So they're both really fairly priced right next to each other. So I don't have a problem rolling out either of them in cash games on DraftKings this week.
Cool. Next game, Bucks and Bears. This one there could be a lot of points here. Where do you guys see it funneling? Here's my question. I'm probably gonna lineups in daily leagues because he's so cheap, and I feel like there are going to be a lot of points here. 2 really bad defenses. Anybody think that's a smart idea?
Yeah, go ahead, Matt. I mean, TJ. Sorry.
I'm not rolling VJX out just because the targets haven't been there the last couple of weeks with what Evans has been doing lately. And in my cash games, I'm looking for heavily targeted guys. And I mean, historically, VJax has been one of the most heavily targeted guys in Tampa Bay, but just hasn't been there lately with the emergence of Evans. So I'm actually kind of staying away despite his attractive price in daily.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's more of the tournament play than obviously.
Okay, that's fair. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was tempted to go with VJax in my tourneys for the same reason as you, Matt. He was really cheap, and there should be points. But one thing I will say, when I rewatched the Bears game, which was actually like yesterday during the day, I actually had a chance to rewatch some of the games, and I saw the Bears, and from last week, you know what, their defensive line really came alive. It's weird that defensive line kind of shows up some games, doesn't show up some other games, so it's tough to tell if that'll be this game, if they're going to be, playing how they played last game, but they do have some talent up front. And Jared Allen had a good game, particularly. He had some pressures, which was interesting to see. So, I mean, they have some talent, and they could disrupt this Tampa Bay offense because, again, remember, this Tampa Bay offensive line is not great, and it can be gotten to. And there's also the fact of the matter that there could be, I think, close to, I'll have to check it now maybe it'll take me some time, but close to 15 to 20 mile per hour winds in this one. And obviously, everybody likes to think like, oh, it's a snow, it's rain, like, oh shit, this is going to be bad for fantasy. But nothing kills fantasy football games like the wind. There's just nothing else. Like if you watch that Bengals Browns game, and and from Thursday night a few weeks ago, and I had so many guys going, and I had Hill in all my daily leagues, and just like the offense was completely stalled because Dalton, couldn't get anything going in the wind. His ball got in the air. And he looked all right the week after. People were like, oh crap, I'm not going to invest in Cincinnati. They got Dalton, but it's like, no, Dalton looks fine in non-windy games. He just can't cut through the wind. He doesn't have enough zip on his passes, and he doesn't have the arm for it. So I would worry about that. I'm going to look that up right now just for our listeners. Yeah. Illinois weather. I used to live out in the Midwest too, so this weather is fucking windy and miserable up there during the winter.
Well, I feel like at least Cutler has the ability to drive the ball in the wind, but he's also Cutler, so yeah.
It's supposed to be 16 to 20 miles. Oh, you got it too?
Yeah, wind 10 to 15 miles per hour with gusts up to 20 miles per hour. Is that what you're looking at?
Yep.
Yeah, so 20 miles per hour that's enough to have an effect. I don't think it's enough where it's going to push me off those guys just because the matchup's so good. Matt Forte is obviously always in play. I like him more on FanDuel just because him and DeMarco are fairly close to each other. Forte at 9,300, DeMarco at 9,000. Probably staying away from him in cash games on DraftKings just because he's $1,000 more than Murray, that being Forte. Alshon and Brandon Marshall both in play. They're similarly priced on DraftKings. Jeffrey is 7,200. Marshall is 7,100. Tampa Bay is 31st in the league versus wide receivers adjusted for strength of schedule. If that win does come into play, it favors Martellus Bennett, who's already favorably priced on DraftKings. He's only $4,000. So he's had a couple bad weeks. That's what we're looking for in daily. Players that are elite or at least near the top of their position, coming off of a couple bad weeks. That's going to lead to a depressed salary, but that's good. We want that value. So I'm all for playing Martellus Bennett in any format.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's going to be. I really feel like it's going to be a big game, so I'm interested to see how it shakes out. So next game, Seahawks Cardinals. Outside of Marshawn Lynch, is there anyone you guys want to play in this game? Because I don't think there is for me.
Well, what if they haven't announced if Fitz is out yet or not? Have they?
No, I don't think so.
He needs a miracle to play. That's the latest report I read.
Miracle to play, yeah.
That sounds good.
I'm still not touching Floyd in any cash games, obviously. I mean, with Fitz out, you got to think he's a GPP play, just because his salary allows, and I don't know how much he'll be matched up on Richard Sherman. I know Sherman doesn't shadow. I don't know Michael Floyd splits left side versus right side, and I don't know how much that'll change with Fitz out. But he's only $3,900 on DraftKings. I had Andre Ellington in one of my DraftKings cash cash game lineups just because he gets so many touches. He's such a big part of the passing game. But that game script could get pretty unfavorable, even though he is a part of the passing game. With CJ Anderson only $200 more, I did a quick little lineup switch, played with my wide receivers just because it makes more sense to roll out CJ Anderson than Andre Ellington, who's going to be just as much part of the passing game uh, as Ellington, and he's going to be in a lot more favorable game script most likely. So I do like Ellington because of his volume um, in daily, but with CJ Anderson, basically the same price. There's not too much incentive to play him. But yeah, no one else that's worth noting.
Yeah, exactly. That's how I feel about this game. Rams and Chargers, another one that I don't have a ton of great plays from either. Both offenses are. I mean, I don't know if you're going to chase Kenny Britt's performance. I don't know if that's wise. And honestly, the Chargers have been a pretty depressing offense lately too. What do you guys think about plays from this game?
Yeah, I mean, I've been off of the Chargers offense for a long time. Their offensive line has collapsed, especially to the interior, and as we know, interior pressure can really disrupt a mobile quarterback, somebody like Rivers, and it has. And this Rams defense is now alive. I don't know what changed, but their defensive line is back to playing the level it had last year. So for me, I'm avoiding all Chargers in my dailies. On the other side of the ball, Hill can make some big plays just by chucking it up there. He's not afraid to throw it up. So Britt's not the worst play because his price hasn't really risen too much. But the Chargers defense has not been the same in recent weeks. But at the same time, they do have a few guys back now. Teo's playing again. Melvin Ingram, I think, is close to playing if he's not playing this week. They had a few guys back in the secondary. So I don't think it's as good a matchup as it would have been a few weeks ago. So I'm not really rolling with anyone in this one, personally.
Yeah, I actually think Keenan Allen is in play on DraftKings because he's only 4,900. Him and Malcolm Floyd kind of flip-flop between left and right side. Neither of them really dominate either side. But Janoris Jenkins has the fourth worst coverage grade of any cornerback that plays majority of the time on the right side, and he has the second worst fantasy points per target of any cornerback that lines up on the right side. So I don't know how much Keenan Allen will play on the left side, but he's cheap, and whenever he's lined up with Jenkins, that's a favorable matchup. So that since they do flip-flop, that makes Floyd a decent GPP play as well. But because he's so cheap, I am playing him in some cash game lineups just to give myself some salary relief. On the other side of the ball, Trey Mason is priced similarly to Isaiah Crowell and Trent Richardson, so I'm not rolling him out in any cash games, but he did see 30 touches last week, so if you're looking for a pivot in a GPP play, I don't mind rolling out Trey Mason. I wouldn't make him the centerpiece of my GPP lineups, but if you're rolling out 10 to 15 lineups, throw him out there instead of T. Rich or Coel, because you're just looking for that like 3 to 4x times value. I'm guessing that T. Rich and Coel will be somewhere 4 to 5 times more owned than Trey Mason. They're not 4 to 5 times as likely to have a 20-point game, so not a bad pivot play there.
Yep, makes sense. Next game, Washington, San Francisco. I think we know how this one is going to go. The only thing I'll say is I saw Rap Sheet had a really interesting note that Jay Gruden and RG3 are neighbors, and he does not think they are having, and he wonders how many cookouts they have. He's unsure how much they get together on the weekends. So what do you guys think about this game, plays from it? Are we pretty much avoiding all Washington players here?
Yeah, I'm off the bandwagon on all my Washington guys, except for maybe no, actually this week I'm off Morris too. The running game's been getting going, but San Francisco's got a good run defense, and Chris Borland's really stepping in and playing as well as I thought he would. Go Badgers! There we go. There's my plug for the week. You may think I'm a fanboy of the Giants, but you don't even know how I feel about the Badgers because we are just killing it right now. We've got Melvin Gordon, we've got the number 3 ranked basketball team, but I'll go back to the point. And yeah. So Chris Borland's really stepped in well at middle linebacker, inside linebacker, I should say, because they play 3-4 in San Fran. And so I don't really like the matchup for Morris either. On the other side of the ball, though, I like Gore a lot. I'm not as high on Kaepernick as TJ is, but TJ had some good points earlier about that, so I'm kind of buying back in. And I think that the receivers are kind of hard to trust there. I think Bolden would be the only one I want to go with. Crabtree, he's been very inconsistent this season. And aside from a really, really, really poor angle that the Giants' backup safety, who's now their starter, Quinton Demps took last week, Crabtree would have had no points last week. I mean, he took that one slant to the house. That should have been a 15-yard gain. So I'm not buying in there. So I don't know, TJ, you want to give me a little, or TJ or Matt, you want to give me a little more of your thoughts on the wide receiver situation and what to do there?
Yeah, from a daily perspective, I think Bolden's in play on DraftKings. He's only $5,200. Again, it's not even that I'm super high on Kaepernick, or I think he's a top 10. I don't even think he's maybe right around number 10 this week. But just from a value perspective, I just really like him because of his price. No one else really in play in this game. No glaring values outside of Cap and maybe Bolden. 49ers defense is in play for sure. 50, not
They're
3,100 on DraftKings and 5,300 on FanDuel. So I don't mind paying for them. They have a really good matchup. Basically just Kaepernick and the 49ers defense for me.
Yep, sounds about right. Getting close to the end here. Dolphins, Broncos. Broncos have a lot of injuries, so I feel like this is going to be a big Demaryius Thomas day. I still think you can set high expectations for Peyton Manning, regardless of whether Sanders or Thomas plays. And I feel like Sanders is not going to play, but I'm not sure about Julius. I know he practiced a few times this week. What do you guys think? What are you guys thinking with this game?
I think my one major take is if Manny doesn't play, I think this could be the coming out party for Cody Latimer.
Oh God, I hope so.
Okay, I thought you were gonna say you didn't like him. I was gonna be like, oh shit.
My MFL 10s would be very happy if that's true.
Yeah, I had him in a few of those too. I turned off notifications because I was getting too many emails. I gotta actually check how I'm doing those. But yeah, Latimer's a really good talent, and talent should win out there sooner than later. So I'd like to see him get going, and I think with Manny's out, that could be the thing there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
I already touched on Mike Wallace and his consistencies. $4,900 on DraftKings, so he's in play over there. Obviously, your normal suspects for the Broncos. Peyton Manning's always in play. Demaryius is always in play. I love C.J. Anderson at $6,000 on DraftKings.
Yep, no doubt.
That's a good call. C.J. Anderson's a really good call. Actually, I missed on that, so I think that he's right. That's almost a must play.
Yeah, definitely. It's such a good price, and he's got a ton of volume. Sunday night, Cowboys and Giants. Does Giants fanboy, you want to take this one?
Yeah, I mean, I said this a lot this week, but I think that the Giants' pass defense has looked good in the past 2 weeks, but that's not their doing. That's because teams have just been running the ball on them and because they haven't been tested. But in this one, I think Romo will have some really big plays, and I kind of like Terrence Williams as a little bit of a contrarian play because he's probably going to see a lot less of Dominic Rodgers-Cromartie. But the Giants did say they're not going to use DRC to completely shadow Dez Bryant, so that means Dez Bryant should have a really big game too. So really, you can't go wrong with Cowboys this week, as sad as it is to say that. And then on the other side of the ball, I think Eli Manning will be a lot better than people think. He had a pretty good game fantasy-wise in the first game against Dallas when they finally – it took the Giants a while to start throwing the ball in that game, but when they did, they moved it with ease for 2 quick touchdowns. So I think they'll come out throwing in this one. And then Jennings, to me, is a solid play, but Odell Beckham is the guy. Obviously, we talked about earlier. You kind of have to get going this week and every week. Do you guys see anything you want to add there?
From a value perspective, there's no glaring values as far as price in the daily games besides Jennings, who's only $5,100. Those NFC games just tend to be high-scoring contests, so you can roll out anyone in a GPP, but from a pricing perspective, there's no one that really jumps off the page this week besides Jennings.
Yeah, I think the Nelk should have a big game, though. And I know he's like 3,900 on DraftKings. Cowboys really struggle against tight ends. I feel like he's going to have a...
Yeah, he had a big game the first game that they matched up with.
Like 7 for 90 or something. Yep. Yeah, I feel like that's one way you could go. But yeah, the Giants are kind of hard to trust right now on offense outside.
Fair.
Yeah, Giants actually number one versus wide receivers adjusted for strength of schedule. It doesn't mean you're going to sit Dez or anything.
Yeah.
But if you're paying up for wide receiver, there's you could pay for Jordy for only $200 more on DraftKings. I'm kind of against paying for wide receivers on in my cash games just because in general Gronk is priced so much lower than the top tier wide receivers, but he gives you the same floor and same ceiling as a top wide receiver. So if I'm
Yeah.
paying for a pass catcher in a cash game, I'm usually going Gronk first, and then if I have room, which is pretty rare, then I'll go receiver. But yeah, just like I said, in GPP, any of those top wide receivers are in play.
Yeah, that's a great point by you on Gronk over paying up for wide receivers in cash games. Two Monday night games this week. We'll cover those real quick before we get out of here. Jets Bills. I think Watkins is a great value on both FanDuel and DraftKings. And inside in the dome on the turf, I feel like he's going to have a big game. But really, outside of that, I don't know if there's anyone I really am desperate to get in my lineups in this game. What about you guys?
Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way. It's just not a game that I want to target in dailies. Granted, I haven't looked at the prices as much, so TJ, you could probably add a little more on this. Do you see anything different? Is there any reason to go contrarian in this one, I should say?
No, even though the targets have been there for Percy Harvin and Eric Decker. I mean, I just don't trust them getting passes from Mike Vick in a cash game or anything, and I don't think the upside is there versus the Buffalo defense to play him in a GPP. But Sammy Watkins is probably going to at least half the snaps will be played against Phillip Adams, who's been atrocious as well. I think he could have a really nice game. So I like Sammy Watkins in all formats.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. And our last game of the week is Ravens Saints. Saints have been pretty bad recently. Do we see that trend reversing? Like I said, I kind of think it's a good game for Steve Smith. And another old veteran too. I think Marcus Colston could have a nice week because he kind of looks. I can't remember who said it this week. I just heard someone say it like. He kind of looks done, but the Saints can't have him be done. They need him now with Brandon Cooks out and everything. I kind of feel like some of that, people are talking up Kenny Stills, but I feel like some of it's going to go back to Marcus Colston. What do you guys think? Dan, you can go first.
Yeah, I think it's going to be Stills, actually. I'm on the Stills bandwagon this week.
Oh, yeah, I know you like Stills. That's right.
Yeah, you've seen some of the stuff I wrote about Stills. I really like Stills. I think he's a really good talent. I just think he needs the opportunity. This will be the week I think he gets it. No, that doesn't mean I don't like Colston, because I like Colston a lot in this one, too. I actually find this matchup to be, and it's not some kind of crazy, thought because it has the second highest over/under of the week, but I think this is going to be the fantasy, points are going to be pouring out in this matchup. Neither team plays at a really fast pace, which hurts him for fantasy perspective, but I don't see much defense going on. The Ravens have been a good defense at times this year, but they lost Jimmy Smith. They've got Ladarius Webb and a bunch of rejects in the secondary. And
is Webb playing?
I'm not even sure if Webb's playing. Is he? Yeah, he's injured too. I forgot about that. He's been playing through it, but even if he plays, he's been he's been a negative for them. So aside from those two, they're really not as great back there. So I really do think that it's going to be a points game. I like Stills in this one. I'm rolling out Stills as like my big play of the week, my big wide receiver 3 flex, however you want to say it, in daily play. But I know you like Colston, Matt, and that's fair too. So I think either way you can go right here.
Yeah, we'll see. Go ahead.
Yeah, I love Stills. He's actually my most owned player in MFL 10s this year. I wrote him up in preseason as top breakout candidate this year. Unfortunately, Brandon Cooks and injuries kind of rained on that parade. But
Yep.
last year he was tops in the league in fantasy points per target. Actually had the highest over the last 3 years fantasy points per target. As far as daily goes, though, both Colston and Stills are priced at $4,200 on DraftKings. We've touched on the matchups in this game. Both secondaries are pretty bad. We talked about how bad Corey White is, so both Smiths are in play. But as far as the Saints receivers go, I'm probably going Colston in cash, Kenny Stills in GPPs. Baltimore ranks 5th in the league versus fifth worst in the league versus number one wide receivers, but you could kind of throw that out the door because they're just plain all misfits in their secondary. So those numbers look at the entire season. So both guys are fair options. Stills is cheaper on FanDuel, so I don't mind playing him in cash, just because he gives you a little bit of salary relief. But on DraftKings, where they're both priced the same, I'd rather play Colston in cash just because you know he's going to be that possession guy. And Stills, even though I like him, he does have a low floor, so I'm not forcing him into cash lineups.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, guys. Well, that's pretty much it for Week 12. Does anybody have any burning takes they need to get off, or anything they need to say before we sign off here?
I think we touched on them all.
I don't think I'm not angry about anything this week. I think.
That's nice. Yeah, it was good to have you on for the whole show, so we didn't have like TJ open up his diary about what's going on in his mind about DraftKings or FanDuel or whatever. So that was nice. It was good to have you on for the whole show, TJ. We'll probably do this again next week. I think we kept it more to like an hour 15-ish, because I know we probably started around 10:45 and had a good amount of crying before we started before we went live. So that was nice. We'll do this again next week.
Yeah, it's a good format. I think it's fun.
Yeah, definitely. So for Dan and TJ, I'll just remind everybody that's tuned in for the show, check out Sportable. Lots of great stuff going on there. If you subscribe to the newsletter, you can get Rich Rebar's exclusive DraftKings plays, which is definitely a good idea. You want to get those. You want to know what Rich is one of the best guys when it comes to DFS, and so you want to get those plays by signing up for the newsletter. And just thanks everyone for tuning in, for checking out the show and asking questions. We appreciate it, and we will be back next Sunday. Thanks again.